Shalom. This is Rabbi Yehuda Glick from Jerusalem. I'm sorry we're a little bit late today due to the development with the corona and the preparations for Passover. We're going to be studying today, we're actually going to start today a series of lessons on the concept of the essence of the Exodus from Egypt. We're going to try to understand what exactly is the Exodus from Egypt coming to teach us. Why is the Exodus from Egypt? We're going to start today reading the verses in the Torah, but we will recall also that the Exodus from Egypt is described in different ways, both in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 16. I believe we'll study that tomorrow. The book of Joshua, chapter 24. The book of Psalms, chapter 105, 106. So we will be studying the concept of the Exodus from Egypt. What is the Exodus from Egypt coming to teach us? Why? What are we supposed to learn? What is the message that we're supposed to be taking back from the Exodus from Egypt? So today we're going to start studying what the Torah teaches us. What the Torah tells us about the Exodus from Egypt. And I'm going to be starting at the first time God approaches Moses in Exodus chapter 3. God says to Moses in verse 7, Vayomer Adonai, and God said, Ra'o ra'iti et oni ami asher b'Mitzrayim. I saw the suffering of my people, my nation, in Egypt, and their cry I heard because of those who are oppressing them. Yadati et machovav. I know their pain. So God says, the first thing he says to Moses, when he says, I want to send you out to Egypt, the first thing he says, the very first thing is God says, I understand the pain. I understand what they are going through. I want to save them from the suffering that Egypt is oppressing them. That is what he says to them. Va'ered, and I'm going lehatzilo miyad Mitzrayim, to save them from the hands of the Egyptians. He then continues. He says, "Leha'aloto min ha'aretz hahi el eretz tova urchava." I want to take them out of Egypt to bring them to a good, wide, special, blessed land. So if we see the Exodus from Egypt, according to the description in Exodus 3, in verse 7 and 8, number one, God hears the suffering of the people of Israel in Egypt. He understands their pain. He identifies with their pain, and he wants to save them from the suffering. The second thing is he wants to bring them from the land they're in right now, from Egypt, to a good land, Eretz Tova, a good land, Rechava, a wide land, Eretz Zavat, Chalav, Udvash, a land flourishing with milk and honey. El Mekom HaKna'ani v'Achiti. And therefore, he says to Moses, I'm going to be sending you to Pharaoh to take my people out of Egypt. What is the purpose? Number one, to save them from the suffering. Number two, to take them out of the land of Egypt and bring them to a land, a flourishing and a good, blessed land. He continues on. And he says to them in verse 12, I will be with you. I will be with you. And this is the symbol that you will know. When you take the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Shalom Murat Gunes. I don't know where you're from Brazil, right? I think. Anyway, shalom. So we're talking about the Exodus from Egypt. Already in the first description, in chapter 3, God gives 3 explanations for why he wants to save the people from Egypt. He wants to take them out of the suffering from their oppressors. He wants to give them, to bring them to a land, a blessed land. And he wants to take them to worship him on the mountain of Sinai. The mountain exactly where God exposes himself, talks to Moses, and tells him about the helping. The next time God approaches Moses and sends him to Egypt, he repeats the same thing And he adds one more thing. In chapter 6, Exodus chapter 6, in verse 2, God speaks to Moses. He says to him, Ani Adonai, I am Lord, I am the Lord. I spoke and I revealed myself to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I want to. V'gam hakimoti et briti otam. I want to fulfill my covenant with the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So the exodus from Egypt, as we see here, Shalom, Rabbi, Shalom, greetings from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Andrew, I love you. God bless you, Malaysia. So what we're seeing here, we're speaking about the exodus from Egypt. And as I said before, number one, God wants to save us from the oppressors, the Egyptian oppressors. Number two, God wants to bring us to a blessed land. Number three, God says he wants to fulfill the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And number four, he wants us to worship him. So far we've seen already in the book of Exodus 4 descriptions of why God is taking us out of Egypt. To save us from the oppressors, to bring us to a blessed land, we should worship him, and to fulfill the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So I'm going now back to Exodus 6, and here he says, I want to give them the land of Canaan that we saw before, and I heard the crying of the people of Israel that we also saw. Va'ezkor briti, I'm remembering my covenant, we also mentioned before, and he repeats again the same thing. So what we see so far in the book of Exodus is the reason God wants to take the people of Israel out of Egypt is, number one, that to save us from the oppressors, to bring us to the blessed land. Shalom from Canada. Shalom, Canada. We love you. To bring us to the blessed land, to fulfill the covenant he had with the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and we should worship him. When we continue on in the book of Exodus, we see another aspect at all, a totally different aspect. In Exodus chapter 22, God is giving us a few different obligations. And one of the obligations is you should respect the stranger. Chapter 22 in Exodus, verse 20. Ger lo toneh. You do not cheat a stranger. Velo tilchatenu. Ki gerim hayitem be'eretz Mitzrayim. Kol almana v'yatom lo tanon. Don't cause suffering to a widow and to an orphan. Im ta'ananet ta'aneh oto. Ki imtza'o kitz'ak elai. If he yells to me, shamoa eshma tza'akato. But what is he teaching us? You know the soul of somebody who was a stranger in a strange land, and therefore what you are supposed to learn from the exodus from Egypt is not to be cruel to the widow, to the orphan, and to the stranger, because you know what it means to be a stranger in a land. So here, one more explanation of what we are supposed to learn from the exodus from Egypt. We're supposed to learn to be caring for those who are been neglected, either by a husband or by a spouse or by a father or by a mother. Our job is to be caring for them. And this we study from the exodus from Egypt. So when we're coming now to Passover, and in Passover, we are supposed to tell the story of the exodus from Egypt. We're supposed to teach our children. We're supposed to spend the Seder night talking and celebrating the exodus from Egypt. According to the book of Exodus, according to the book of the Torah, we have 4 major issues, or 5 actually major issues, we are supposed to talk about and learn from this exodus. Number 1, we're supposed to learn that God saved us from the oppressors. Number 2, we're supposed to learn that God wanted us to take us to the land that he promised us, to a good land. Number 3, he wants us to worship him. Number 4, he wants to fulfill the covenant with the patriarchs. And number 5, he wants us to learn to be caring people for the other. And all of these things we are supposed to learn from the exodus from Egypt. And this is what the Torah is teaching us about the exodus of Egypt. We are supposed to learn how to be people who worship God and how to be people who understand the suffering of those who are suffering. We will see in the next lessons that we'll speak about the exodus of Egypt, we'll see that the prophets learned different things from the exodus from Egypt. As I said before, we will be studying in the next few days the exodus from Egypt as it appears in Joshua's speech, one of his very last speeches in Joshua 24. We will be studying what the prophet Ezekiel talks about and how he refers to the exodus from Egypt according to Ezekiel chapter 16. And we will be studying exactly what the author of the book of Psalms wants us to learn from the exodus from Egypt in chapters 105 and 106. So for today we studied what the Torah teaches us so far in the book of Exodus about the exodus from Egypt. As I said, 5 things that we're supposed to learn from the exodus from Egypt. All of them have to do with the recognition of God. All of them have to do with our obligation to recognize God, but they're based on 5 different aspects. The aspect of God helping us from our suffering, the aspect of God bringing us to a promised, blessed, good land flourishing with honey and milk. He wants us to worship Him. He wants us to understand that He is keeping the covenant with the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and He wants us to learn to be better people, caring about those who do not have an ability to help themselves. This lesson today will be relatively shorter than the other lessons. I'm apologizing. I said we're deep in the midst of cleaning for Passover and in the midst of our preparations for our fighting with the Corona. But I want to say thank you and shalom to all those who joined us now. Shalom, Boker Tov to Keith. Shalom, and I said shalom to our guests from Canada, and shalom to Murat Guinness. Thank you so much for joining our lesson today, all of you. We love you, and shalom from Jerusalem to you all.